So I want to welcome our first speaker, is the Executive Director of Child and Family Services. Please welcome Mary Teegee.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Lheidli T'enneh for allowing us on their territory to conduct this very important business. As always, I'm honored to be in this role as Executive Director of Child and Family Services, a role I've held for almost 18 years. And so I consider myself and Travis fossils. We've been here a long time. I'm from Takla Nation. I come from the Lakkibu clan. I come from the House of Nagyep. My hereditary name is Maushkabu, which is White Wolf. And I'm just really honored to be here, as I said, and I am also Gikson and Carrier. So there are many exciting things that we've had this last year. I have a wonderful team. We've grown quite large, so we have many new staff in all the communities. We have, community service delivery plans that are all implemented in the community. So there are many exciting things that we've worked on, and we couldn't do this work without our phenomenal frontline staff and my phenomenal leadership team. And so I'm going to take a time now to have my team introduce themselves, starting with Stephanie.
Howdy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fonfol. I'm the Director of Jurisdiction with Sekani Family Services.
Hadi, good morning. Sozi, Kayla, Brownstone, Sadney.
Jen, click.
And I'm the Youth Services Manager for Prevention Services in Prince George.
Good morning, Jason Morgan, Director of Operations for Community and Organizational Development.
Okay. You can click next slide. We're just getting our slide projector thing working here. So I oversee child and family. There's prevention programs, child and family preservation. We have community prevention services, youth services, guardianship and resources, and jurisdiction. We also, of course, within those services, we have different departments, and so all of those departments will be able to talk about those themselves. So right now, oh, geez, sorry, I forgot. I didn't forget you guys. We're gonna let them introduce themselves.
Save the best for last.
Yes, I saved the best for last.
Good morning, I'm Sonia Rowland. I'm the Director of Practice, and I work with the Guardianship and Resource Programs across the agency.
Good morning, my name is Cheryl Thomas. I'm the Director of Practice for Prevention Services.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we have community prevention services, and we're really focused on what the nations themselves are saying on early intervention and prevention strategies. So we want to strengthen the relationships with our communities, and we want to develop community-based strategies that's going to really look at the social determinants of health. The community service delivery plan that we've developed really is based on that sense of a holistic well-being. We follow the life cycle approach that CSFS is founded on. And so each of the community service delivery plans, my staff went out to the communities. We've had discussions with chief and council and community staff and asked them really, what are your priorities in your community? What are those prevention strategies? We also had staff and community staff look at their existing safety plans, for example, each community of health plans. And what we tried to do is really amalgamate all that information into a community service delivery plan. Those community service delivery plan, of course, then steer the funding arrangements that we have with each community. And I just must commend Jason for really leading this work. It's been a big body of work. Next slide. So we have the funding that the reason that we're able to do this. You heard Cindy Blackstock prior to me speaking about the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. And just to recap, we won that court case, and that court case proved that Canada was discriminatory to First Nations children. And the orders stated that there now needed to be prevention cost at actuals. So prior to this court ruling, we had very little money in prevention, if any at all, in some cases. We had really innovative ways of trying to get prevention services to communities. We had a lot of support from Carol to help us get community prevention services in community. And so once we won that court case, that spurred on a whole new era of funding at actual. So prevention services are now realized. Now, of course, we need to understand that we need to ensure that the prevention services we're providing in communities are doing what we want. So we have to look at outcomes. What do we want these prevention services to do? We want to ensure that the communities are taken care of, children have safe homes, are protected, but we want to ensure that there's nothing happening to that family that's going to allow for the minister or MCFD to come and apprehend the children. So we do everything we can to prevent that from happening, to keep families together. We also know that culture is prevention. We've heard that. Culture is medicine. Mom says potlatch is medicine. So we have to ensure that all our programs and services that we provide to the communities are based in culture. In fact, we know that children who know who they are, where they come from, and have a strong sense of identity, regardless of where they're coming from, have a least chance of engaging in high-risk activity because they have that strength of self, and that's what we need to do. So when we think about prevention, we're thinking about prevention around the whole scope of life. So the life cycle approach is basically, if you have a healthy baby, you'll have a healthy child. You have a healthy child, you'll have a healthy adult. You have a healthy adult, you'll have a healthy parent. And that you also will have healthy elders. So you'll see how all the preventative services, we have to think outside the box. Prevention is holistic, it's based in culture, and it follows the life cycle approach. So some of the outcomes when we think about the community service delivery plans and the prevention services is realizing how the CHRT orders can positively impact communities. We're able to dedicate our resources and positions to be hired at the community level. All the communities have their own family preservation workers or are in the process of hiring them. They're hiring youth workers. They're looking to hire elder support. So it's really community-led. We definitely want to keep children in the home. And cultural resources, we definitely are looking to the communities for their own culture, cultural resources, language speakers, elders, and communities that could assist us with this work. And of course, the importance of embedding culture in all our programs and services. So one of the other things, which is what we're engaged in, is the community wellness teams. And so we talked about jurisdiction, again, with Cindy. We talked about C92, but one of the pillars that CSFS is founded on is our mandate, and our mandate is that Carriers County nations will become self-determining in social, health, and legal services, and that was a mandate and vision by our elders over 30 years ago. So everything that we do at Carriers County Family Services, I always say that is by design. It's not accidental that we have one of the best agencies in Canada that provides child and family and health services together under one umbrella. It's all done by design. And so one of the ways that we're really ensuring that the community voice is heard and that they're empowered to make decisions for their children and families and their communities is through the community wellness teams. I often say this, when we talk about jurisdiction, really what that means is that we have the power to make decisions ourselves, that we have that decision-making power. And through the community wellness teams, that's how we're going to do that. So the community wellness teams, they will come and there'll be an issue in community. Say, for example, it could be an increase in teenage pregnancy, It could be that. And so they will come together and say, look, there's this issue that we have, this challenge. How do we come to work together to deal with this issue? And you would have not only the community members that are chosen by the community, but also Carey County Family Service members. They could have a teacher in their community wellness team. That we could have whoever they want in the community, and they will be making the decisions. When it comes to child welfare, for example, who best knows what's going on in the community but the community members themselves? So this is another example. Say a father loses his job and the mother is trying to take care of 2 children. Finally, the children aren't attending. This is actually based on some real cases. The children aren't attending school, and when they do, they don't have lunches. So then the alert goes out to the ministry, and we find out that, in fact, that the father had lost his job, very proud man. His wife is going through postpartum. There's issues going on there. But instead of going to the ministry, what could happen, the community wellness team would know that. And so they could come together and say, look, he's lost his job, the wife is going through postpartum, what do they need? And then we could build a plan to support and surround that community, that family, until they get back on their feet. So we can provide food, we could provide sometimes transportation for the children to go to school, we can provide the mental health supports for the mother. There's a whole wraparound services, so we take care of the family together, and that's the strength of community wellness teams. Of course, culture, every child deserves to know their identity, history, ceremonies, indigenous laws, legends, stories, myths, family, connections to the land, territory, and their indigenous language. So we're also implementing the TRC calls to action and placing our culture and our values at the center. We have also our family preservation teams. Cheryl Thomas oversees, she's a director of prevention services. So within Carey County Family Services, we have family preservation staff. And again, they're the ones that are working with the communities, with the families to ensure that they have the supports that they require to keep their children safe and with them. We also ensure that those families that are already have some MCFD involvement, that they are provided the supports. So some of the supports includes navigating the child welfare system, court support, accessing programs such as skill building groups that promote family wellness. We have teams that are located in Prince George, Vancouver, Fort St. James, Burns Lake area, and all the communities. So within the prevention funding that we're providing to the communities directly, each of the communities will have their own family preservation worker that will work with our team, so that it'll be a really close collaborative partnership. Also within the community staffing, we are also providing training and mentorship opportunities. We also have the Family Empowerment Program underneath Cheryl's program. So the Family Empowerment Program offers supervised access between children and their families. We work to build that better relationship and build that relationship with children and their parents through play. We transport children to their parents for family visits. And we also work with the parents to really build up positive parenting techniques. So we have family empowerment programs in Prince George, Fort St. James, Vanderhoof, and in Burns Lake. I just wanted to make mention now, when we think about the family programs that we have, and the heartbreaking findings of the 215 young children in residential school, that we must understand that while we're talking about the family preservation and the child and family program and everything that we do at CSFS, it's really to overcome those impacts of residential school. And that it's not our parents' fault, it's not our children's fault that sometimes they're in care of the ministry. Really, when you think about it, it's the impact of residential school that's breaking families and breaking our hearts. So when children are put into residential school at such a young age, they weren't parented themselves. They were in an institution. So they never learned those parenting skills. So what our program tries to do in a good, kind, and soft way is to give back that rightful place for parents to take care of their children. And how do we do that? And it's understanding the root causes, the systemic issues. Sometimes our parents are heartbroken. They've been to residential school, and one of the things they do is self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. We see that in our opioid crisis. Again, it's not their fault. But how do we come together with all our services to support that family, to support that individual, to be a good, strong parent? And that's basically what our program is trying to do in a good and kind way. We also have the Family Preservation Project. This is outreach, and it's a fairly new program where we have housing. And so one of the issues, as we know, we're seeing it played out here in Prince George, around Tent City or Moccasin Flats, where many of our people are homeless. And again, that's a direct impact of residential school and colonization. So when we think about how do we come to solutions for these challenges, it's what we do at CSFS is that we actually talk to the ones that service is going to assist, that person that's going to benefit from that service. We can't be just like developing programs and services and activities without including the ones that is going to benefit. So there's certain things that we definitely know that was told to us by communities, our urban members, is that one of the big issues was housing. And so what happened about 3 or 4 years ago, the board, along with direction from their chiefs, provided CSFS with a mandate for housing as well. So since then, we've been working. It's very hard to get funding. We are working and we'll be working really diligently within the next year to get housing for our youth and housing for our members that are almost homeless or are homeless. So we have the soup bus that provides food distribution 3 times a week. It's a very successful program. We have, and I must say this, it's not just Indigenous people that we provide the soup bus services to. We provide soup bus service to everybody. So when there's a downturn in economy, you can definitely see when there were a lot of layoffs. I was privileged to assist a couple of days, but just every walk of life is accessing that service. We also have support services to locate and secure affordable and sustainable housing. And again, this is really important because what happens when our children are aging out, and oftentimes you will hear, and it is true, that many of the homeless in the urban settings, not only in Prince George, but in Vancouver and elsewhere, were former children in care. And so what we're trying to do is really work with the landlords and the homeowners to secure places for our children before they age out of care and to provide that ongoing supports. And so there's certain things that, and I don't know how Patrick does it and how my staff do it, but they're able to find reasonable rent places, and then we're in agreement with them, and we provide, like we say we're going to provide the support. So this is really like stuff that's heartbreaking sometimes, but it's also very rewarding when we find a home for somebody that was previously homeless or on the verge of being homeless. So just a great amount of work it takes into finding homes for our youth. We also have referrals to the community agencies and individuals, and what we're going to be doing is providing this service to Burns Lake area. One thing that I will always let the communities know, and the chief and councils and the community workers know, is if you have families, or especially the young single mothers and the young single fathers, there's an increase moving to the urban setting or to the municipality of Burns Lake or Vanderhoof or into Prince George, to let our staff know, because then we could provide supports as soon as they get to Prince George. We know sometimes that when a family will move to Prince George, they've lived in reserve all their whole life, and so they have their little child just run down the street to go see auntie, and it's not a big deal. But in the city it is. So sometimes ministry will get a call that the parents aren't taking care of their children properly, and then they're involved in that life, in that family. So if we're notified earlier, we have family preservation workers in Prince George and across our service delivery area, so that we can head it off at the pass, so then we could provide some skills and just like a navigation and give them information about busing and whatever support. So because we can provide that support to that family when they come to Prince George. Okay, we have the Calls to Justice program. So as you know, we've had since 2006, we had the Highway of Tears initiative that we developed after the Highway of Tears Symposium. And that initiative, we were able to provide education and awareness to not only Sekani Family Service communities, but communities across the north. We developed a very successful toolkit, and then after that developed a Train the Trainers toolkit for community workers. So we were requested all across BC, all across Canada, to provide that training. And as happens, government commits to all these great things, and then they pull the funding. So we had lost the funding a few years ago, but we still were doing the work off the side of our desk. We were still trying to provide that support, at the national level, still bringing our voice to the missing, murdered Indigenous women issues. And so what happened a couple of years ago is that once the calls for justice came, as you know, there was a missing and murdered Indigenous women inquiry. And so once that inquiry was done, the calls to justice report came out. I always felt that we had enough recommendations with the Highway of Tears recommendations, the Wally Opal recommendations, the recommendations from RCAP, the recommendations from the Stolen Sisters, the recommendations from the National Aboriginal Women's Summits, again and again, recommendations. What we need is a Ending Violence Against Indigenous Women Act so that there is ongoing funding. But what we have a calls to justice report. And so what happened is that the Carolyn Bennett at the time, Minister Bennett, had requested a meeting with me to say, well, how can we roll this out? Because they were getting criticized because there was a report, but nothing was happening on the ground. So I proposed that they should follow what we did with the Highway of Tears initiative across Canada. So then we were awarded some funds, which we're calling it the Calls to Justice Program. And we are starting the work. So we're going to be actually doing the training nationally with our Highway of Tears toolkit and the Train the Trainers. We are also going to be having a national symposium for the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we're also going to be, we've already had our first meeting with the governing body from the Highway of Tears, and those are the families of the victims, to reinvigorate the Highway of Tears because of the good work that we've already established. So I'm quite excited. And again, Cheryl oversees that program. And our Calls to Justice coordinator is Elsie Weeb, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have the Bridging to Employment, and again, this is a life skills program. And it's a program that we've had for 21 years, Carol, 22 maybe longer. Yeah, and it's a very successful program. It's a program that it just sort of runs itself. And Samantha Wertak is the leader of that, and she's amazing. But I love the stories because some of the participants have really been, some of them have been on the border of actually being homeless and having really difficult times. And so some of the graduates from this program have gone on to get their degree at university, have gone on to get stable jobs. So it's one of my, I love this program. It's 9 weeks and it's free. That's a huge thing. We also have the same type of program in Burns Lake, and we've helped like so many underemployed, undereducated people get to a place where they can take care of their families, they can take care of themselves, and so it's a beautiful program, and I just really commend my staff. And I know again, its funding is always an issue, so we do the best with what we have. So one of the other things within the prevention program, and it's close to all our hearts, and I just wanted to So we've had the pleasure of having Sarah Hine as part of the Sekani Family Services family for decades. And in fact, Sarah was one of the first mentors I came, when I first started working at CSFS, it was Sarah that helped me to navigate Sekani and to really help me how to, as best she could, how to organize all my files. She was very, very meticulous, and she was very strong and very firm, and she wanted things done impeccably, just as she was impeccably dressed. And so she also just loved working with families. She loved working with babies, as we know. So years after she started, after I was working with her and really getting trained and mentored by her and Mabel, these phenomenal women, she ended up coming and working for me as a maternal child health worker. And it was amazing. And we had we also started the baby program, the crib, what was that one called? The Safe Baby program, with providing the cradles to each of the families that came forward. So we're going to be, under the lead of Cheryl Thomas and her team again, we're developing we've almost completed it, developed a proposal to establish a house of hope, is what we call it. And that house will be for mothers that are addicted or having difficulties and challenges, so that they could have a successful pregnancy. And it'll be a program that we can have where their own children will be there. We're going to combine that program with Dawn's new daycare here in Prince George. And so definitely we know that once that proposal has started, it's going to, again, it'll be the advocacy and the political lobbying that I will undertake, Warner and I, in our leadership. And it's important because this House of Hope will also be sort of that broader planning that we have and collaboration with our healing center. So you'll see how important that healing center is. Oftentimes we'll have parents that are having difficulty and challenges keeping clean and sober, and so then they'll lose visitation with their children, or they'll lose their children, and then there's a long wait list for them to get to treatment. So that importance of that healing center when it comes to that service that we need. So the House of Hope, we're going to call it Sarah's House, after our very own Sarah Hine. Youth services. Okay, this again. Youth services, I started this, Mabel and Warner, the bosses that I had all those years ago, 18 years, I had started as a cultural support worker to assist the CHRs and to ensure that culture was embedded in everything we did. I thought, that's great, it's a 6-month contract, I'm fine, I'll do this is exciting. And the first person I had to deal with was Helen Michelle. Big, bossy Helen Michelle. I'm like, oh my God. And then, I had to deal with Helen Michelle, deal with her, what's right. She's like telling me what to do. And if you don't know Helen really well, like, she is very intimidating and scary. So I said, okay, I'm going to listen to Helen, do what she wants to do, because nobody was going to tell her how to do her role at the CHR, which was what I was supposed to do. So we had that. And then the next thing, Mabel and Warner said, Mary, can you take over the elders, the healing the healers? I said, okay, I could do that. So then it was there was challenges right there. And so who were the next two people that I dealt with or had to meet? And Emma Baker and Cecile. So again, two really strong, really strong, Cecile Ketlow, really strong women. And I thought, oh my God, I'm just going to leave this job already, because they were so, and I think maybe that's why sometimes I'm intimidating and scary, because I had to deal with these intimidating, scary women that were telling me what to do. So that was the elders. And then Mabel gave me, oh, can you develop youth services? And so this was something that we worked on together, and it was close to Mabel's heart. So again, very little money, a lot of dreams and a lot of visions with little money. So we managed. So now we have, through our prevention funding and through a lot of political lobbying and advocacy, we do have some provincial money as well. Not a lot, but some. And so we have youth services in Prince George, Vanderhoof, and Burns Lake. We're going to be expanding services to the Fort St. James area and Smithers. We provide services from 8 to 29 years of age. And so there was the question earlier about providing services to children that have reached the age of majority. We absolutely do provide that service to those children. The young adults, we provide the ongoing supports for former children in care as well. So we support our member nations' youth care workers with hiring and training. So again, those prevention dollars, the community service delivery plan, each of the communities have dollars in there to hire their own youth worker, and we're going to provide the mentorship and the training for them. We focus on high-risk programs, and we also offer programs to young adults, as you know, post-care. One of the great achievements we've had over the last year. The next one is the Skies Drop-In Center. We have the Drop-In Center, the Youth Center, again, Mabel and Dawn, I have to really commend them for keeping the youth services going when there were really little or no dollars. And so they started the Vancouver Youth Center, which has been up and running now for over 4 years. Or Vandroof for 4 years. Has it been 4 years already? 3 years. Anyways, I'm getting old. I don't even remember the time. So November 20th of last year, we opened up the Skies Drop-In Center, and that, of course, Skies means the Children of Chief's House. And this was sort of a vision of ours, and Amy Merritt really took this and ran and was just tenacious, and we were able to get this youth center up and running. But I had sent Amy and some of my staff down to Vancouver to look at best practices and go to some of the youth centers there. And what we noticed, if a child is doing, this is what I was always believed in youth services, and sometimes I did have challenges in making sure that communities were on board with the ideology that I had. I think when the youth were joining our youth support program, our youth program, what I had asked for were not the ones that were doing well in school or all of that. Absolutely, there's some services for them and activities for them, absolutely, and acknowledgements for them. But what I really wanted to concentrate were those youth that were having difficulties, that were having challenges or considered high risk. That's what our priority was, and it still is. So when they're coming to the door, like many places will say, well, you're high, you're drunk, you're this, you're that, you're whatever, and they won't provide services. So then you have this so many youth that are out on the street. And so we have a low barrier service, which is huge. It's the only service of its kind in British Columbia, or well, not British Columbia, but in northern British Columbia. And so we provide advocacy services, housing supports, outreach, cultural support, connection, and life skills. So right away, if they've been on the street for a while, they're able to take showers there. There's food, we could feed them. There's laundry facilities, hygiene supplies, and even storage spaces to keep their really treasured pictures or jewelry that they've somehow maintained in these storage spaces. And it's open 7 days a week now. And we serve between 30 to 35 young adults, and the number keeps increasing. We definitely know we could serve more. I think it's really important, this service, to understand what my staff go through. And at least 2-3 times a week, there is an overdose in and or around the center, and my staff are all really strong people because they're the ones that are doing the CPR. They're the one that's giving our Narcan. And what's really sad, though, is the lack of services that we have here in Prince George. So, for example, one of the youth, after being provided 4 doses of Narcan, was there and very sick. And so, of course, the RCMP was there, the ambulance. And so we said, so my staff are saying, where does this child go? Where do we bring this child? Well, we can't go to the hospital. The beds are full, and there's no treatment facilities. They're not going to take them. No, there's no room in detox. There's no homes for them at all. They're all full. So the RCMP is like, well, just let them back out. Like, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing we can do. So what we've done innovatively, and again, because I have wonderful staff, is that through the COVID funding, we were able to provide hotels to these ones that had no place to go. And what I've done is the 24/7 care, my staff going in to check in on them. And so that's sort of what we've been doing, and just really triaging that issue. But it's very real, and I think next we've advocated, I've been advocating for having a youth strategy here, youth opioid strategy here in Prince George. I know Travis and his team with Sam are undertaking that opioid work within the communities, but definitely a significant strategy and a significant investment has to occur in the north to deal with youth opioid, and definitely that is something that we're working on. I do have a commitment from Minister Simons, also the Mayor, Lynn Hall, to work and develop, have all the stakeholders come together, look where the gaps in services, do an environmental scan, and come up with a really concrete strategy. So first and foremost, we have to develop a task force to look at it and actually have an actionable task force that really know what we need to do. And so hopefully we can have something coordinated. So we now have the future plans. Again, so we're looking at secure housing for those at risk and those experiencing homelessness, providing training to youth care staff in community. We're also partnering with the CSFS Health and Research Department to develop the Foundry Services in Burns Lake. So kudos and great work to our own Dr. Travis Hollick and his team. We're going to be having youth services co-locate with Foundry to provide wraparound holistic services for youth in that area. We also have the CYAC development, the Child Youth Advocacy Center, and again, there's nothing like that in BC, and there's only another Indigenous one in Canada, and that's up in Nunavut, and I had the privilege of visiting that CYAC. And for those that don't know, the Child Youth Advocacy Center is to have a wraparound, again, child-friendly and soft services. So if a child has been abused, be it sexually or physically abused, that they come into the center and that they only need to really tell their story once. You'd have the RCMP there, the lawyers, the social workers, the medical professionals, or whoever, and they would be then provided wraparound services. We also know that families need to be involved in that care. Oftentimes, we have a child that's coming in to be abused, but the family isn't considered in many cases. So the CYAC would include that family. What support services does a family? How do we help family take care of that child that has been traumatized? So it's a really wonderful initiative. The way that I envision it is that we would have the central place here in Prince George, and then we would actually have hubs out to Fort St. John, eventually out to Terrace, out to Prince Rupert, to provide that service and that advocacy, and also that mentorship for those workers. Right now, you have what we call the scan clinic, and you often have a long wait list. And for mental health professionals, you know that once there's trauma, the faster you can get that service, the better outcomes that you have. So in some cases, we know that children who have been sexually abused have come to Prince George, and the wait list is like weeks and weeks, or if not a couple of months. And so so when this came to, this Child Youth Advocacy Center came to as a vision for us when we were working on the CEDAR project. And that CEDAR project was research that looked at intravenous drug use in Indigenous youth. And so that Indigenous youth drug use found that they, yeah, I got it, Mike. So that they are, we know what kind of services they need, because they're the ones that told us like there was no services for when they were abused as a young adult or anything. So then we developed the CYAC to provide that service to them. We also, as part of our Sonia's program, we have resource services for caregivers. And of course, CSFS, we provide prevention services, but we also provide services what we consider or delegated services, but those are the social workers within the Provincial Act, so foster parents, children in care. And so we provide safe alternate care for Indigenous children. We provide ongoing training and support to caregivers, care providers, and community members. We also do the home studies and out-of-care studies with adults. And priority, of course, is given to families from our member nations. And that is one thing we definitely know that we need to keep our children home. We want our children to stay at home. So we need, at this point, anybody that's willing to come take care of children to come forward. We're going to have, eventually we will have a campaign to increase foster parents coming into community or to provide services to our children. We also have to remember that there are different ways now that we have prevention funding to provide support services to the extended family. So if grandparents are taking care of their children, if that's a placement, we can provide that support now, which we never had that ability to do before. So we have to really think about moving forward, how are we going to provide safe places for our children to stay? So there are things that we are going to be working on, like it's not only to really get our family members to come forward to take care of children that are currently in care, but that may go into care, that we have safe homes for them. And we are also going to be developing what we call the clan house model. And so it's really important when we're, like right now, we're in court with Canada again. So once we win that court case again, it'll be capital costs at actuals. So we will be able to actually start building those clan houses so our children, when they're at risk, would be able to stay at those homes. So guardianship for services for children in care. Social workers are responsible for the care and well-being of children through a continuing custody order through the CSFS, the Child and Family and Community Services Act of BC. I know I've been asked this before, like because C-92 is a federal legislation, we are still under provincial legislation until such time as we develop our own carrier Sekani child and family laws. And so right now, we're still under the provincial legislation. And so within that legislation, we have guardianship for those children in care that are a continuing custody order or are considered ward of the state. So we're the ones that make the decision. So we work with community, we work with family to try to get those orders rescinded so that they could stay with family. So again, it's a lot of heartbreaking work, especially when you think about our children in care. You know, they've been traumatized. I mean, there was a reason that they came into care in the first place. So there's the trauma of the reason why they came into care. Then there's the trauma of that attachment disorder because they've been ripped away from the only family they knew. And then you have all of that trauma, and then we're trying to provide supports, especially when they're in stranger care. So the importance of being connected to family and community cannot be understated. It is and I don't think that our community members, it's not just about, you know, becoming full-fledged foster parents, but it's even maintaining calls, like call your little cousin or your little niece or nephew that's in care, just to have that connection to community. Because we know this, when they turn 19, they always go back home. They always go back to their community. So we need to foster those connections early and to make sure that they stay there. There's only so much my social workers can do, but it's really, the rest is up to the families, the communities to really embrace those children. I must commend all the communities that have welcoming home ceremonies. Of course, we're there to support you. But anything that we can do to foster those visits or to foster those phone calls or connection, my workers are at the ready. So we have our guardianship goals that are to support more children to live with extended family or return to a parent. We're also, I'm excited about this, we're going to assume the guardianship responsibilities for children in temporary care. Now, what happens right now is that if there's a call and a child is apprehended by the ministry sometimes will notify us and the communities, but sometimes they won't. We're also not funded to do that work. So if the ministry calls a child is in need of protection, sometimes the ministry workers, because they are they're so understaffed, they're not able to connect to the families, nor do they know the communities. So we would assume that temporary custody. So as soon as a child goes into care and is in need of protection, my workers, we would be notified and we would provide the supports to that family and to that child so that there's connection to the family and to the community, which is huge, so important. So we're under, and under Sonia's leadership, we're really, we're working towards that day when we can assume that responsibilities. We're also expanding our services to Vancouver, Houston, and Smithers. We have a lot of families, and again, even in those communities, the homeless issue is very, very real. So we're opening up an office in Smithers, and we have already established an office in Vancouver. We're going to be providing those prevention services to our families that live there. So one of the, I know I only have probably a minute here to go, but one of the huge things that we're doing is a jurisdiction framework, the jurisdiction work that we're doing, and that's Director Stephanie Cohnfall is overseeing that work. And again, this is really to develop our own child and family services laws. I always say that we've always had inherent jurisdiction over our children. What we haven't had are the resources to breathe life into our own laws. And now that we do have prevention funding, we do have our medical, like our primary care, we're really, really in a good position to take on those, to take on our own laws. I think we have to consider one of the things that we had to consider when we developed the model, our jurisdiction framework, is that we have different types of leadership in community. We have chief and council, but we also have hereditary chiefs, and they are all Section 35 rights holders. So we have to ensure that everybody has a say when we develop this model. We have roles for the matriarchs, we have roles for the parents, for the youth. And so this jurisdiction framework, the work we're going to be undertaking, is that we have a leadership oversight body that's going to be comprised of clan leaders and the nation chiefs. So they will be overseeing all the work that we're undertaking. We also will have a legislative committee. We've already started sort of some of the preliminary drafting of our own Sekani laws. And we will also have a negotiations committee. And this is, if you remember what Cindy was talking about, was the funding for C92. We have to ensure that when we negotiate what is funded, that it is always going to be like a living agreement. We can't just say this is done. We can never take the feds off the hook, because what right now in the C92 agreements is that Canada has very, very clear indemnification and liability clauses in there, that now that they've given them money, a set amount, Canada has no longer has any obligation. We're going to ensure that that doesn't happen with our agreements. So it's quite, it'll be quite intense. So this is just the framework for you to look at. We're going to be undertaking community engagement, education sessions again. We're going to be establishing focus groups. So we definitely have a very clear path moving forwards along with the community. Again, this is just a jurisdiction framework that we've gone through the jurisdiction framework quite a few times in communities, at our different AGAs, at the community wellness team training, and again, we will be highlighting this when we go to our communities. So next. So the jurisdiction framework, it's the child and family well-being. We have to look at how we define child and family well-being and how we define our laws. We can't limit it to the narrow scope that the feds are saying is child and family. Again, Sekani Family Services, we're holistic. We have health and child and family. We have our own we have the legal mandate. So how do we come together to ensure that the wellness of families are really defined by us and are funded at that level? So that's a huge undertaking, but definitely we'll do that alongside you. So our law will uphold the well-being of families and offer children and youth the best opportunity to achieve their full potential. So in closing, our program and service delivery remains founded on our culture, our laws, our batlas, our values. And so we are on the precipice of great change, of something that our ancestors and our leaders in the past have fought for, that we're at that day right now. And we really must capitalize on that day. And the way that we're going to do that is that if all community members are part of that, we can't do it alone. We have to have everybody being together, being committed to getting to the place where no longer will any child have to say that they're suffering from the impacts of residential school. They will only have to read about it in the history books. And it's incumbent on all of us to make that day a reality. Masai. Thank you.
While you take a breath and maybe a sip of water, I just want to call for questions. I think there are a couple of questions that have come online. And if you have a question in the room, if you could make your way out to the back just so that we could do it as smoothly as possible. Thanks.
Can I also make a request that if there's any case-specific question that not be asked publicly, that they could come directly to me?
Thank you. We have one question online saying, how about the men of all the communities? Is there a place for men to stay during a cold day, or a place in each community for them to get in and talk?
That's actually a really good question, and it's something that I know that I've talked with my CEO about and all of us, that within our Calls for Justice program, and I talk about the missing murdered women, we cannot do any preventative work or anything without including the men. We do have men's groups across all our communities for the most part. We support that work. We do have a men's group here in Prince George as well. We're establishing fathers groups. But as far as the homeless piece, where I know I've definitely heard that, I do know they have an initiative in Burns Lake area where they're establishing safe homes for men, and definitely we're supporting that work. And any of the communities, you have to remember whatever they're going to be doing to address their issues, that we're there to support them.
Thank you. And another question related to the Highway of Tears. This person had asked previously if reward money could be established by asking bands to contribute money along with CSFS.
We have tried to work with the Attorney General's office and with the RCMP. We've been that's brought up before, and there's a lot of steps that has to be taken, and there's a lot of manpower. So when you get those tips, they have to go to a central place. Definitely, I know the last time we had any funding to do this, we weren't able to get through all those hoops. But there's something that we can consider now that we're receiving some new funding.
Thank you. That's all the online questions.
Thank you. And if people haven't thought of their questions or just thinking about it, you can always get them answered by emailing communications@csfs.org after the fact, and they will be forwarded to Mary or her team. Thank you so much for...
Thank you.
I was listening and being, wow, there's so much being done, and I'm so proud of all you and all of your team. Let's everybody thank the team. Is there another question, sorry, before the...
Sorry, we just had one more question pop up online, asking if there will be summer camps next summer for the kids.
Yep, we will have summer camps.
Nice short answer, Mary. Thank you. Thank you to Mary and her team, all the staff and communities. Thank you so much.